Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar this morning. I'm going to give everyone just a couple more minutes to let the attendees continue to join, but this webinar is being recorded and I will be uploading it to the SILT YouTube later. So if you have to hop off early or you missed the end, don't worry because you'll have an opportunity to catch up later. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so as people continue joining, I'm going to go ahead and get started with introductions. I just wanted to start out with a huge thank you to all of our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to be here and share their expertise with us. I'm incredibly excited to hear everything they have to say. And I also wanted to give a huge thank you to the sponsor of this webinar, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, SARE. Without the support, this outreach and education would not be possible. Some housekeeping notes to consider is as we continue with this webinar, you'll notice that we have a Q&A function. So as the panelists each give their presentation, they'll have about 20 minutes to present. And then afterwards, we're going to reserve an extra 5 minutes to answer questions. So make sure that if you have any questions as they come up to ask the panelists, because if we don't have time for additional questions at the end, you want to make sure that you get them in before their presentations are over. And then at the very end of this webinar, don't log off because we have a very exciting opportunity to win a raffle prize. If you are over the age of 21 and in the state of Iowa, if you fill out the survey at the end of this webinar, you will be entered for the chance to win a bottle of our locally sourced Farmstead Red labeled SILT wine in partnership with Fireside Winery. Or if you're under the age of 21 or outside the state of Iowa, you'll be entered to win a SILT merch gift basket. So when the Zoom webinar concludes, make sure you stay on the browser so that you are able to fill out the post-webinar survey and sign up for our e-newsletter. And if you do both of those things, you'll have an opportunity to win a really exciting prize. So you don't want to miss out on that. So to kick things off, I am incredibly excited to tell you a little bit more about the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust. My name is Katie Doss, and I am the state coordinator here at SILT. If you haven't heard of us, the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust is a 501c3, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and our mission is to permanently protect Iowa's farmland for sustainable food farming and to connect new and beginning farmers to farming opportunities who may not otherwise have the ability to access farmland. A little bit more about SILT is we are a land trust, and land trusts are the only kind of 501(c)(3) nonprofit organizations that can make forever promises on land it does not own. This promise is called a conservation easement, and this is the primary way that SILT permanently protects farmland for sustainable food farming. Other ways that silk can protect farmland is through something called a reserved life estate, which is where landowners have the ability to will their land to silt. So they maintain all ownerships and all rights to the land during their lifetime, and then at the time of their passing, silt becomes the manager and owner of that land, and then stewards that land to make sure that we're continuing to promote sustainable agriculture and local food systems. Silt can also acquire farms through bequests or land donations. So people have the ability to outright give their land to us. Since its founding in 2015, SILT has protected 16 farms across the state of Iowa, totaling 1,200 acres, and we are just getting started. It is almost our 10th birthday, which is an incredibly exciting milestone that we get to celebrate here at SILT. And one thing also that we're trying to prioritize is our Circle Our Cities campaign, which is where we are prioritizing permanent protection in and around areas that are major cities in Iowa. That way, as cities continue to grow and expand, we are making sure that we always have access to those local food systems and that these farmers are closest to market. We don't know what Iowa is going to look like 100 years in the future. So this is one way to protect our farmland to make sure that as things change, we always have that security. RY. In Iowa, we lose about 275 acres of farmland per day. And despite being more than 85% farmland, Iowa imports 90% of our food. Our vision is a future of Iowa where we are supporting local farmers and the health of our community to ensure that our communities always have access to that food that we're growing right here, and to develop those personal relationships with farmers that you get to have. So, a little bit more on what exactly is a silt conservation easement, since you heard me reference that earlier in this presentation. A silt conservation easement is a legal document that is tied to the deed of a land that exists in perpetuity. So that means no matter who owns that farmland, whether it's you or your neighbor or your next of kin, maybe a new and beginning or historically underserved farmer, that land always has to stay in sustainable food farming in alignment with the terms of the conservation easement. A conservation easement devalues land by about 40%. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing because, in the eyes of a land assessor, when land cannot be used for different purposes going forward, then that's a limited use, and so it's worth less. But that also makes this land more accessible to new and beginning farmers who may not otherwise be able to purchase this farmland, as the value is 40% devalued from when it previously was, creating more opportunities to people who maybe have that passion and that drive for farmland, as we know so many of these people exist across the state of Iowa, and many of them are probably on this webinar, and giving them that access to produce their own food. Because conservation easements devalue the value of a land, there are some opportunities for landowners to gain some of that back. Placing an easement on your land through SILT qualifies you for a 16-year, 100% deduction of your adjusted gross income at the federal level, or up to a 20-year, $100,000 Iowa state tax credit. SILT is also an eligible entity through the ACEP ALE program. And if you're interested in learning more about this, please reach out to us. But basically, what that is a program where SILT will partner with you to apply, and you will be eligible to gain 50% of that devaluation back. So say a parcel of land is valued at 200,000 and a conservation easement brings it down to 100,000. If you're selected through the ACEP ALE program, then you are eligible to receive $50,000 of that devaluation back. So it's a great way for people to help maintain some of that capital asset, as for many people, land is their most valuable asset. But the main reason that people permanently protect their farm through SILT is to maintain their legacy. For many of these people, they've been acting as stewards of the land, maybe their entire lifetime or even generations of farmers. And it can be a true tragedy to see that land lost to development or see those family farms with that deep history go. And so SILT is one way to make sure that they are always maintaining that legacy no matter what happens as things continue to grow and change. SILT conservation easements protect from zoning changes and development, and so that permanent protection and creating access for future opportunities and for people who are the next generations of farmers are the main reasons why people choose to protect their land through SILT. So, a little bit more on what we mean by sustainable agriculture, because now I've said that quite a few times. Generally, what we mean is guidelines for farming that work in harmony with the land rather than depleting it. So, examples of this include practices that build soil health, improve water and air quality, and promote energy efficiency. Currently, SILT asks farmers be working towards or already have a third-party certification to show that they are farming their land sustainably. And right now, those certifications include certified biodynamic, USDA certified organic, Food Alliance approved, animal welfare approved, or certified naturally grown. But if there's another certification that a farmer is interested in, or if a farmer decides that maybe a third-party certification doesn't necessarily put them into a market that is beneficial to them, and it's not something that they need to pursue, then we're happy to work with farmers to do a more in-depth evaluation to ensure that sustainable practices are still being implemented on the farmland because we want to create less barriers for farmers rather than more. And so our goal is to work with farmers to make sure that the land is both being farmed sustainably, but we aren't creating additional hurdles for them to jump through. And then a little bit more on projects that we've been working on. Over the past year, SILT has been working with three different organizations across the state of Iowa on an NRCS Increasing Land Access grant. We've been partnering with Feed Iowa First in Cedar Rapids, Global Greens LSI in Des Moines, and We Arose in Waterloo. And if you're local to any of these areas, I highly recommend checking out these incredible organizations. They do so much to grow food for their communities and have so many different opportunities to get involved, from CSAs to outreach programs. So I highly recommend checking them out. But like many organizations, this work is being impacted by federal funding. So we are working together now to navigate the situation and to try and continue this work so that we can keep connecting historically underserved farmers to land access. We've been incredibly grateful to all of the individual donors and other foundations who have stepped up to help us work to continue this work as we navigate whether or not the funding for this program is going to continue. So thank you all so much to all of the people who have supported us so far and to all of you who showed up today, because by just showing up to this webinar to learn more, you're supporting this work. So thank you again for all of you for being here. And that's about everything I have on SILT. So before I get too ahead of myself, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Thank you all so much for listening to my SILT spiel. Our first speaker that we have today is, sorry, give me a moment to pull up the order. First off, we're going to be hearing from Beth Romer. So, Beth Romer's passion for agriculture was kindled on her family's Century Farm, where she learned firsthand the value of hard work and respect for stewarding the land for future generations. Now she's honored to lead the Choose Iowa team in supporting Iowa farms and ag businesses through the Choose Iowa program, which identifies and promotes the food, beverages, and ag products that are grown, raised, and made in Iowa. Beth earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Marketing from Wayne State College and a Master's in Business Administration from Iowa State University. When not helping on her family's farm or exploring farmers markets and agritourism destinations, Beth and her husband James raise specialty cut flowers with a menagerie of farm animals near Altoona, Iowa. Thank you so much for being here today, Beth. If you want to go ahead and share your screen.
Gladly. Gladly. Thank you. I appreciate being here and joining. Thank you for letting me share and for the great invitation. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to visit with all of you and excited to share today, talk a little bit about some funding opportunities and Choose Iowa. Hopefully the presentation will click through here. Okay, so when we talk about Choose Iowa is a brand program, first and foremost, and it is similar to brand programs that exist in other states across our country. So within the 50 states that we have, there are actually 57 brand programs that promote ag products in those respective states. Some states love their brand programs so much that they actually have more than one. We have one that does a lot of different things, including some unique funding opportunities. So I'm excited to share with you about Choose Iowa. Our vision is to connect consumers to Iowa food and ag products and expand markets for Iowa farmers. And we do that in several different ways. The key components of that is through a statewide brand program, the logo and our brand identity, and through several grants that we administer that are funded through the state of Iowa that we'll talk about in a little bit. So I want to share the background of the state brand program because that helps better understand the grants. So the brand program is statewide and it provides a single logo and brand that we can use across Iowa to identify and promote the foods, beverages, and ag products that we grow, raise, and make here in Iowa. And this is to support our Iowa ag commodities. And by that, I mean anything from peas and carrots to corn and soybeans, but specifically, we really like to tie things back to individual farms and really help those farms with their diversification and growth. We're all about increasing market opportunities and encouraging people when you have options, please choose Iowa and purchase local foods and beverages. So the Choose Iowa logo is appearing on more and more foods and ag products across the state. People, if they join the program, they have the option of using stickers if they have existing labels to add the logo, and or they can add it directly as they update their branding and their labels. They can add the logo directly on. So these are some of our founding members. Because the Choose Iowa logo is trademarked, then there is a trademark protection and an agreement with members that allows them to use the logo. It also gives them several other benefits, but the membership criteria is that you just need to be in good standing with the state, currently reside or conduct business here in Iowa, and then you either produce, process, prepare, or sell foods and ag products in Iowa that meet or exceed minimum criteria. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but or you can be an organization that supports the Choose Iowa program ideas and its members. There's 3 steps to being a member, and I'm mentioning this because that applies later for one of the funding opportunities. But there's a brief membership application. There's a membership, once that's approved, then there's a brief membership agreement that you sign, annual dues of $100 that gets invested directly in the program. And then you set up your business profile so people can find you in the Find Local directory. So benefits, again, I'm mentioning that Find Local directory. All of the promotions that we do for consumers is to encourage them to find local products and businesses in that Find Local directory. And then by becoming a Choose Iowa member, it makes you eligible for food banks and schools that are part of the Choose Iowa food purchasing pilot program. Then those schools and food banks can purchase from you as a Choose Iowa member. And we are hoping that this program it's a pilot program right now. We're hoping that that continues to be funded. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. We have exclusive events and promotions, including a new Choose Iowa passport we're rolling out this year to help people find and visit farms, restaurants that serve Iowa ingredients, and then also stores that sell Iowa ag products. We're doing a farm store crawl statewide in June, the 21st and 22nd, and a farm open house in September. We're also offering some co-op advertising opportunities later this year and some social media campaigns. And we have a newsletter for members with funding resources in that, plus more. So now to talk about grants. Here in this map, you can see that there are a lot of grant recipients who have received funding through the various Choose Iowa grant programs in the last 4 years. Uh, the state of Iowa has invested over $7.8 million in grant funds in the Choose Iowa program, in the various grant programs. And the newest grants recipients to be announced will soon be the value added grant recipients for 2025 and the butchery grant recipients, which will be announced soon as well. The value added grant is the first grant that helped our program get started. The goal of this grant is to increase sales of Iowa ag products by increasing production capacity or expanding market access for value-added products. And this is unique against or compared to several federal programs in that individual organizations, farms, and businesses can apply for this grant. The grant amount that can be requested is up to 25,000. There is no minimum. So we have funded some grant projects as small as a little over $1,000, several projects that were under $5,000. So it's a very flexible grant. It is a cost share grant, which means, and there is a one-to-one match, which means that for every dollar of grant funding that is requested, it must be matched by equal or greater amount of private funding. And then the grant is also a reimbursement grant, which means that if someone is selected for funding, then they sign an agreement to do their grant project, and then they submit their invoices or their receipts, and the grant funds are reimbursed to them afterwards. You do not have to be a member of the Choose Iowa Grant Program or the brand program to apply for this grant. We had 99 applications in this latest round, and those are being scored right now. We hope the end of next month to make an announcement of those recipients. So we're pretty excited to see which projects receive funding. Um, the projects for the value added grant must increase sales by either, again, increasing production capacity or expanding your market access. So, for example, that might be building an on-farm store or expanding your cold storage or a refrigerated delivery vehicle. So those are some common projects that have been funded in the past. One stipulation people should understand is that a project should not be in progress until the grant is awarded. And so we are audited every year, and the auditors do look at those dates of receipts submitted, and then make sure that any project that you apply for funding, that your project can be completed in 12 months or less, and your project must be completed or done in the state of Iowa. Again, we were talking about some of those project examples. Food processing, training, workshops, specialized equipment is generally funded more so than general purpose. So an example of specialized equipment would be one project last year was funded for a still for the production of for making essential oil from lavender. And that's very specialized equipment and difficult to obtain. Generalized equipment, for example, would be a pallet jack, something where you could use a lot of different ways. That's less likely to be funded than the specialized things. Um, so if you have questions, ideas, you can contact our team, and we are happy to help you navigate what might be a good fit for this grant. In the application, they ask 6 main questions in addition to contact information, ask you to describe your business, its history, and how it interacts with Iowa ag and farms, describe your project in detail, describe how you're going to increase sales, and describe your budget. What are the things that you plan to purchase, and how will you finance those purchases? Then create a timeline. So once you are awarded funding, if should you be awarded funding, what is the first step you're going to take? How much time is that going to take? Then what is the next step, and how much time will that take? That's what they're looking for in that answer. Then the last question is, what are the outcomes you anticipate seeing as a result of doing your project? There are points assigned to the answer of each question. All those details, including the scoring criteria, are in the grant guidelines for each of the grants, and you can find all of this information at chooseiowa.com and then click on grants. Each grant then has its own page, but we list all of them on the main grants page. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out. So, timeline for this grant. The application period opens typically early December. It closes the end of January at noon on the day that it closes. And we have not determined that for the next year yet, so I'm just saying end of January. But we just want to let you know it closes at noon, not 5, not midnight, noon. And then recipients are contacted in March, ideally. If scoring is finished by then, agreements are finalized, and then sometime in April is when recipients are announced. And again, end note, there is a budget worksheet. We have found that some of the early applicants really struggled on how to detail out their budgets and explain why they needed to purchase some things. And so now a budget worksheet is a requirement for applying for this grant. So I just wanted to mention if you have any questions on how to fill that out, again, contact our team. We're here to help. You can apply online at chooseiowa.com. So the second grant I want to talk about that is funded through the state of Iowa and administered through Choose Iowa is a dairy innovation grant. This grant has $750,000 in funding, and you can request a maximum of $100,000 per grant awardee. And this also requires that one-to-one match, and it is again a reimbursement grant. The Dairy Innovation Grant focuses on on-farm processing, labor-reducing technology, or you can request a combination of both. And again, you do not have to be a member of Choose Iowa to apply for this one. The Butchery Innovation Grant is a new one within the Choose Iowa umbrella. This was announced in January of 2025. There's $250,000 available funding. You can request up to $100,000. There's no minimum amount. And you have to provide a match again for this one. In-kind contributions, I want to note, for all of the Choose Iowa grants are not accepted. So that would be the value of your time or anything that's a non financial amount that is not accepted. And this grant is particularly focused on butchery and meat processing equipment. And you do not need to be a member of the Choose Iowa program to apply for this. However, this one is unique and we're piloting where if you are a Choose Iowa member, you might receive bonus points on your application score. The last funding program that I want to share details about within the Choose Iowa program is the Food Purchasing Pilot Program. And this is for focused on food banks and schools. The food bank pilot rolled out last summer, and there are 6 key food banks in Iowa and Denmark that are participating in this. If this is continued, then emergency feeding organizations will be eligible to apply in the future. The school purchasing pilot rolled out in March, just a few weeks ago, and $70,000 was allocated for schools. And the application period for schools will close April 7th. And schools are able to apply for up to $1,000 per school building. And districts can apply for all of the school buildings in their district, or individual schools can apply for this funding. There is a match requirement, so for every $1,000 of funding that a school would request through this purchasing pilot program, then the school needs to spend an additional $1,000 on local food. And this is where that membership in the Choose Iowa brand program pertains specifically to this program, is that purchases of local food, according to the legislation, those purchases can only be done or made from Choose Iowa members. And the eligible foods that can be purchased are meat and poultry, dairy, eggs, honey, and produce. For schools, that would be dairy products other than milk, because there is a separate program that funds milk purchases for schools. So, distinctions between the brand and grants. The brand is focused on marketing and promotion and includes foods, beverages, and ag products. This year, we are expanding to include all of horticulture and natural fibers. More announcements later in the year to come on that. It gives people the ability to use the Choose Iowa logo to identify their foods and their ag products. And then those products to use the logo, must meet or exceed minimum criteria. There are those annual membership dues, and then that enables people to participate in the passport and other exclusive events. The grants are available for anyone in Iowa to apply for the specific ones if they meet those criteria. You do not need to be a member to apply, but for the food purchasing pilot, they can only purchase from members. And then there's no minimum amount that you can apply for, but there are maximums depending on the grants. If you're looking for that information, you can go to chooseiowa.com and click on the grants tab to go to the grants page. And then also additional funding opportunities. We want to try and be as helpful as possible. So lower down, if you keep scrolling on the grants page, you will see additional grant funding opportunities listed. And we link to those programs so that you can see those guidelines and all those details separately. If you know of a grant program that we should link to, please let us know. And then there are a couple of these that I think are ending that we will be pulling off this list in the near future. But I wanted to highlight that if you go to chooseiowa.com, you can look at all of the Choose Iowa grants and then find information about additional grant opportunities. So if you're curious about how you can join, you can become a member at chooseiowa.com. There is that become a member button where you start your journey. You can apply for grants at chooseiowa.com, and all those details are on the grants page. And then invite your neighbors if you know someone that could benefit from a grant or may be an excellent fit to participate in the brand program. If they're producing local food and ag products in Iowa, please share the good news with them. You can follow us on social media. Our handle on all of the social media accounts is at Choose Iowa. And you can contact us, send us an email, and reach our whole team at chooseiowa@iowaagriculture.gov. It's a great way to ask questions and get a quicker answer because we are all checking that account constantly. So at this time or later, depending upon when Katie recommends, I will be happy to answer questions.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions that they've thought of, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A section. We do have some pre-prepared questions that people have sent in when they registered for the webinar, and I know one of them was whether or not you've gotten any feedback on the effectiveness of the Choose Iowa logo as a marketing tool, and whether or not you've heard from any farmers that that's been a very impactful tool to let people know that their products are made here.
Oh, yes, we are so excited. So, I think it was last week, we we were pleased to have a panel discussion at the Iowa Tourism Conference, and there were um, three Choose Iowa members who shared on that panel discussion, and it was really cool to see how each one of them was shared about the impacts that they are making in their community, but then also how they have been connecting with others through Choose Iowa in sourcing Iowa products for, one example, sourcing Iowa products for her on-farm store, and for others in just sharing the good word and sharing news about local foods from Iowa and other ag products. We recently conducted a study through Iowa State Extension and asked Iowans if you knew that a product was from Iowa versus another state, would you be more likely to purchase that Iowa product? And 86% of those respondents said that they would support or select the Iowa product over the out-of-state product. And of those, 94% said that they would be willing to even pay a little bit more if they knew that a product was specifically from Iowa versus another state. So we are encouraged and excited that now that this brand program exists, that we are able to help with that identification. And on the grant side, it's been neat to see how many grant projects, the value added grant especially, is helping people with whatever bottleneck they have in helping their farm operation grow or their food business. So there's been some really neat projects related to cold storage that expands some growing seasons. And we're calculating lately, we're working on just what that investment of those $7.8 million of state funding, what kind of investment that has created now. So excited to see the growth.
That's so incredible to hear and so exciting to see Iowans rallying around choosing local foods. It looks like we don't have any questions that I've seen come through in the chat, but I just wanted to plug on April 2nd coming up. SILT is a member of the Iowa Food System Coalition, and we're having a day on the Hill to help advocate for the expansion of the Choose Iowa program and all of the great work it's been doing. So if you're available on April 2nd and are interested in being at the Iowa State Capitol, I'll be there, so you'll already have a friend to go with. But I highly recommend showing up and advocating for this really incredible program so that we can continue to support Iowa farmers. Well, thank you so much, Beth, for being here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, which is Kim Andersen. Kim is a longtime educator currently teaching from Southern New Hampshire University online, as well as an organic farmer in Southeast Iowa. Kim serves on the board for the Iowa Organic Association. She lives on her grandparents' Century Farm, where heritage and sustainability are always in the forefront. Kim, along with her husband Steve and brother Kevin, grow organic corn, soybeans, wheat, oats, hay, blueberries, chestnuts, hazelnuts, pawpaws, persimmons, pumpkins, and strawberries. Every farm and field are unique, and their farm goals revolve around doing what is best for each field based on the lay of the land, soil type, feasibility, and resources. They put their best ground along the Skunk River into a permanent wetland in 2011. Kim is hopeful that one of her nephews or grandchildren will want to carry on the family farm someday. A great day for Kim is a walk in the timber to revel in the peace. Kim, go ahead and take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Katie. Will you be able to share my slides?
Yes, of course. Let me pull
Okay.
them up for you.
Thank you, Julie, for the invitation.
It's taking me a moment to find the share screen button, but I got there eventually.
Okay. Um, Thanks for that introduction. I did include my email and the website. Um, I'm mostly known as the Blueberry Lady, which I think is an okay thing to be called. So I'm okay with that. Um, I included a quote here on this first slide by Wendell Berry. Most of you probably know who he is, but um, a sustainable agriculture does not deplete soils or people. So these things are really important to me, and especially as we've, ventured into specialty crops and needed more help on the farm to accomplish that. We're empty nesters, and so it's usually just two people here doing a lot of the work, but we do hire people as well, and that's one of the things I was asked to talk about today. If you go to the next slide, Katie, I just wanted to kind of show you where I'm at in the state of Iowa. So the map at the top left shows the little dot. We're about an hour south of Iowa City, 15 minutes south of Washington, Iowa. We're actually in Jefferson County. And the picture at the top right is an aerial of our acreage, and then the blueberry field. You can see we have a lot of frontage on a highway there. We're on a state highway, and that's kind of a negative for me, and I've tried to make it a positive, having all that traffic going past. Um, we planted a field, a 5-acre field to blueberries in 2017. There are 98 rows, 2,563 plants, and 8 varieties. We know how many plants because we counted it for a contest. So that's the only way I've got that number in my head. Then last year, through a Choose Iowa grant, we added strawberries to our berry offerings by putting in 3, they're called caterpillar tunnels from Farmer's Friend. They're 16-foot wide by 100-foot long. Each tunnel has 10 rows, so with 100 plants. So each tunnel holds 1,000 strawberry plants. And we had 3 varieties last year, so a different variety in each tunnel. We're going to continue that this year, but we're changing one of the varieties. Okay, the next slide, please. I just wanted to show off some of those blueberries, which hopefully in this picture you can see how big they are. And the strawberries, which were delicious. That's my husband in the lower left. We're just kind of trying to take some pictures as to how much the plants have grown. We put them in as 2-year-olds and they were maybe 20 inches tall. So he's only 5'9", but still the plants are they're 9 and 10 years old now, so they're getting to full production, and a lot of them are getting 5 and 6 feet tall. Um, And then the strawberry tunnel, this picture was taken in October. You can see a few spots where we lost plants, but overall it was a really great experience. And we actually did our last picking of strawberries on November 15th, which was pretty amazing, we thought. Okay, next slide. So with that background, I was asked to talk about marketing, how we market, and I'm mostly going to talk about the blueberries and strawberries. The blueberry field was designed and built as a U-pick. I had been picking blueberries in Illinois for 20 years and wanted something closer. So having something at my own farm made a lot of sense. I researched it for 7 years before I actually pulled the trigger. Now I wish I'd have done it sooner. We are hoping to sell the majority of our berries you pick, and they are. We do pick some as well, and we had to expand like our crew to do that. That was the first couple of years, like whatever needed picked got picked. It was great. I've never paid to advertise, mostly used social media. But then several years ago, we had kind of a bumper crop, and it felt bad that we weren't able to get it all picked. So then we had to think a little bit more about how we were going to deal with that. As you probably all know, berries are not very shelf stable. You know, they don't last a long time. And so it's really important to get them moved quickly. So our theory is get people to come here, pick them themselves. That's the very best situation. The next best situation is we pick them and then someone picks them up the next day. That meant this refrigerator that you see in the picture in the top right, purchasing that 2 years ago so that we would have storage. This is a picture in the middle of us actually sorting. We do everything by volume, not weight. Picture in the lower right, I think it got turned. I'm not sure what happened, but that's a gallon bag. Do sell some frozen to conferences like Practical Farmers of Iowa, the Iowa Organic Conference. The people in charge of those meals contact us and want us to freeze some for them. We have sold some through Food Hub as well, always frozen, just because of the challenge of getting fresh picked and moved very quickly. We've also sold wholesale and partnered with an ice cream maker last year, which was really fun. And we're planning to do that again this year. And then the picture with the coins, I just wanted to point out that that is a quarter and a 50-cent, just to wow you a little bit with one of our varieties called Chandler. And that's a picture of our farm stand, which is inside of the blueberry field. So this is where people check in and check out when they're coming for U-pick, but we've also expanded after the blueberry U-pick season. We still use this farm stand to run a farm store into October. Okay, the next slide, please. So in adding strawberries to the mix last year in 2024, we decided pretty early on, if you look at the picture in the middle of those spacing of those rows, those strawberry plants are 12 inches apart in the row, and then the rows are 12 inches, but then we have 3 like aisleways for us to walk, you know, to be able to get through there to pick. And it's really not wide enough. I'm guessing that it's like 21 inches or something, but it's not wide enough for like strollers or wagons. So we determined, and this is not inside of our fenced blueberry field, it's up on a hill on behind our acreage. We decided it wasn't going to be conducive for U-pick. So we're doing this strictly as we pick it and sell it fresh. And here's the refrigerator full of all the clamshells of strawberries. And we are freezing some as well. Then what happens once the blueberry season ends, the farm stand continues, and we're really working hard to train people to come to us to pick up these strawberries. We're also bringing in other items from local farms, like you see a picture here of the mums, the pumpkins that we grow. even some of our orchard crops like the pawpaw and persimmon, we were able to sell directly to the consumer at our farm stand this year. The ice cream was very popular. This is one that featured our strawberries in the picture. It was called Pink Pony Swirl. The other one that was extremely popular, they let us name, and I didn't have a picture of it, but it was called Peachberry Bottom, and it was a peach ice cream with a blueberry swirl in it, made from our blueberries. So some awesome ice cream. Um, so that's really how we're marketing things. Okay, next slide. Labor, which, you know, I think this is the thing that was the most scary to me about that I wasn't going to be able to do everything myself, and what was I going to do to find people to work. We kind of have two different labor forces. They work together sometimes separately. The first labor source has been mostly teens. I've started to stick with age 14 or up. I've tried some younger than that, and it seems to never work very well. So I'm really sticking to 14 and up. I start them over minimum wage. I give incentives about, they get a 50-cent raise every 6 months, but they keep coming back. So one of the girls in this picture, in the lower left, the one in the very front, the blonde, she is going on year 4 here. And she knows as much as I do or more, probably. It's been really great to have her stick with us so long. She's really proud that she's our longest term employee to date. We have tried having a mixture of girls and boys, and I've had no bad experiences with that, but I've been kind of warned that little things could develop, maybe trying to show off to one another or something. So we've really kind of stuck to girls. I'm working with these girls like on a daily basis, and I just love that when it's all girls, because I feel like our conversations can be freer. I also do incentives like give gifts, and this picture was taken yesterday morning. These two girls are homeschooled, and they were doing their Iowa assessments. And so I took them to breakfast yesterday morning, just as an educator. I want to tell them that they're valuable to me as an employee, but I really want them to also focus on their school and not choose work over school. We also do celebrations, like at the end of, some of it might be kind of silly, but like when we finish pruning, we'll probably have a little celebration. At the end of the U-pick season, we usually take them out to a nice dinner somewhere, usually a local restaurant. So anyway, then the other part of our labor force is made up of Amish girls. Per their request, they are age 21 or older, because this is an old order Amish community where they are allowed to keep their own money at age 21. And they don't have a lot of opportunities and ways to earn money. So anyway, we've developed a good relationship. Last year we had anywhere from 6 to 7. It kind of like changed during the season, depending on who was available. We had 2 girls get married last fall, so they are no longer available, and that's going to continue to happen. One of the things I do to help them out is provide rides, because some of them do live a little far, that it would be like over an hour buggy ride to get here, and that's kind of too far, to expect them to do that. Another thing we do for both the Amish girls and our teens is provide fruit weekly in season. My thought is I sure wouldn't want to work at a blueberry farm and then not be eating those blueberries at my own house. So they basically get a fruit share. Then the Amish girls especially, but some of the teen girls too, help out with picking blueberries. They all help with picking strawberries. But the Amish girls are really experts in picking blueberries now. And we pay for that, whichever works out the best for them. The best I can describe it is as piecework. And mostly I pay them per bucket. And we they just total up how many buckets they picked for the day for me, whether that was 16 buckets or 20 buckets. I pay them so much a bucket, and then they just divvy it up among themselves. Um, but sometimes in the season, like early in the blueberry season or later in the blueberry season, when it might take longer to fill a bucket because you're having to move around more, then I'll just think we'll calculate it out. And if that works out to be better to pay them their hourly wage, then that's what I'll do. So I always want it to come out on the best end for them. Okay, next slide. These are some of the tasks that we do at the Blueberry Bottom Farm related to blueberries and strawberries. And all of these tasks I've listed, I do with them. What's not on this list is all the tasks that they don't get involved in. Things like irrigation and fertigation and setting up the irrigation at the beginning of the season, draining it at the end of the season. All of those mowing, all of those tasks are done by my husband or myself. But these tasks, pruning, which we're currently doing, we hope to wrap up this week. We're really close. We always strive to be done by the end of March, and we've never made it before. And I think this time we're going to. So that's exciting. March to October, there's weeding in the blueberry field. But thanks to grant money, we were able to do fabric on our entire blueberry field. This past year, we finished by mid-October. So we're hoping that our weeding is going to be much less and more manageable this year. The weed fabric has also really helped us retain moisture. One of our berries was bigger than it's ever been last year. And the only thing we can figure out is we had the fabric down in April, and we think we were able to hold that moisture in and grow bigger blueberries in that variety. So that was exciting. April, we're hoping to plant the strawberries in April this year. Due to receiving the grant and getting the tunnels and getting them set up, we planted strawberries the middle of May last year, but we hope to be at least 3 weeks earlier than that. We're also planting a new variety that produces more early. And so we're hoping to have that better overlap with our blueberry season, that when people come to pick blueberries, they can also buy strawberries. Last year, that was going on, but we didn't have enough to satisfy people. We never have enough berries to satisfy everyone, really. Then June to August, we're picking blueberries through the U-Pick system. And the girls, mostly the teen girls that you see pictured, they work at the stand. The Amish girls prefer not to kind of do that. They would rather be out weeding or picking the blueberries, or packing the blueberries, those kinds of jobs. So we do have some separation of duties there. June through October, we were picking strawberries, selling them at this farm stand. And the other kind of big task, but not as often as picking in the strawberry tunnels, was cutting runners, because we're growing day neutrals as annuals. So we don't want it to produce more strawberry plants. We want to produce more strawberries on the plant. And then the weeding at first was was more frequent, but what we noticed as the season went on, and I think what you probably saw in the prior picture, is as the strawberry plants got bigger, the weeds really didn't compete. So weeding was very minimal later in the season. Okay, next slide. Am I doing okay on time? Okay. So people have asked, how do we find employees? And these are my answers. Prayer, word of mouth. I've never advertised. I actually have teen girls now, like starting at age 13, sending me messages through my website or getting my number and texting me saying, can I work at the blueberry field? So, and I've gotten in with some families that have numerous girls, so I think I'll be getting the younger sisters of the ones who work here now, which is always fun. So I just wanted to share that because people are always asking me how I found people. So these pictures, I just want to show off clean fields. So this is when the one at the top, showing the blueberry field after it's been weeded with all the hardwood chip mulch. And then the picture at the bottom is as we were wrapping up last fall, and the plants are turning red and looking pretty, and we have all this gorgeous fabric out in the field, keeping the weeds at bay. So we also didn't really have any comments from customers. We kind of expected some people to make comments because during blueberry season last year, part of the field was finished with the fabric, part wasn't. Here's a picture in the top left of my husband, and what it looks like when you have all this grass and weed in your row, and how awesome it looks when you get it all out. And then this is one of my youngest grandsons down here in the left. He absolutely loves strawberries. So we had just picked a bunch of strawberries. So we set him on the table in the middle of the buckets. And I wish this was a video and you could hear him because he just kept giggling. He just couldn't get over. He was so overwhelmed by all those strawberries. He just had no idea what to do. So that's fun. Okay, next slide. Okay, I just wanted to bring it back to, oh, there's another picture that got flipped sideways. Sorry about that. So our farm goals are building community, growing for food versus feed, and share what we love, be resilient, sustainable, and fair. And I think with everything I've shared with you about labor and marketing, that we're accomplishing those goals. The picture that's flipped is our oldest customer to date that we know of. Not everybody tells you their age, obviously, but I think she's 97 now, and this was when she was 94 or 5. She had never picked blueberries before, and she came with several generations of her family. And at first, she wouldn't accept the little stool from us, but then she did accept it. And they started picking, and believe it or not, all the younger generation of her family was like, we got enough, we're done. And she's like, they gave us this row, we're picking this whole. She was so funny. And I ran into her not too long ago, and she goes, I'll be back this summer, God willing that I'm still alive. So she's a real sweetie. And then these other pictures are my grandchildren, which I absolutely love having them here and love having them making memories, riding their little four-wheeler out to the field and picking. They in the one picture they have what we call the kid buckets. They're just hold a quart, and we found that little kids really like to not mix their berries with their mom's berries. They want their berries to take home, so we started getting these little buckets for that reason. And then I was told that we could plug some things we have coming up. So big for us, we're calling it our second annual. We've been doing plant sales as pop-ups for several springs after we order in plants and what we have left over. It kind of grew during COVID because we had to order in lots of 10. And so we ended up with more plants than we normally did. So we've expanded this. We're bringing in other vendors. So our spring plant sale is going to be on the Saturday of Mother's Day weekend, May 10th. It looks like cut off to me, but it's from 10 to 2. We sell blueberry, 2-year-old blueberry potted plants, the same varieties that we grow. We give a planting and care tip sheet. We're also selling the strawberry bare roots that we grow. And then we're having some fun things this year. We're having blueberry pancakes. We're having blueberry and strawberry brats. We're having somebody with honey that we sell their honey at our farm stand. We have some flower farmer bringing fresh bouquets. We have an Amish grower bringing like hanging baskets and vegetable starts and all kinds of plants that they grow in their greenhouse. We have an Amish baker making pies and cinnamon rolls. So people can buy those for their Mother's Day celebration. So it's turned into a big thing and we love it. And it's a great way to kind of like kick off a season for us. And that's all I've got. And I'm apologizing because I have to leave at 11:15 to go pick up some Amish girls. So if there's any questions, I'd love to answer them now.
Yes, thank you so much, Kim, for everything you've shared. I know a farmer is always on the run. It looks like we did have one question in the chat from Amber, and that question was, what do winters look like on a berry farm, and how do you prepare your crops for the winter? And that they love your setup.
Okay, thank you. Well, with the strawberries, we are growing them as annuals. So we actually plant them in the spring and we pull them in the fall and we put all the plants in a big compost pile. This year we left the fabric down, but in the future we'll be taking it up and putting a cover crop in those tunnels um, by mid to the end of October so we can get those established. And then the blueberries, they're all high bush blueberries out of Michigan. So they go dormant. The leaves all turn red and look beautiful in the fall. Then they all fall off. So we don't really have to do anything special other than draining irrigation so that we don't have any broken pipes and so forth. But the blueberry plants are very well suited to cold. We do love it when there's snow because it helps insulate. So we don't like when it gets like -20 with no snow, but they can still handle it.
Well, thank you so much for all of your insight and thank you for being here. I know you have to get on the move soon, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, but thank you again. So our final speaker that we have is Teresa Wiemerslage, who is a field specialist with the Farm, Food, and Enterprise Development Program at Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. In her current position, she specializes in food system development, food hubs, farm to school, and on-farm food safety. She lives on a fourth-generation family farm in the northeast corner of the state where they raise cattle, corn, and hay.
And I forgot to unmute myself before I shared my screen. Good morning, everyone. Glad I could join you today. I was asked to share a little bit of information about food hubs and how they work in the state and what opportunities they provide to farmers interested in growing more food crops. I usually don't get a lot of time to talk about stuff, so I tend to pack a lot of information into my slides. I'd like to start with this first one because I want to give a definition for what the term food hub means and then where they fall within the bigger food system. So food hub is still a relatively new term. It was termed by the USDA in 2009. It's a business or an organization that actively manages the aggregation, distribution, and marketing of source identified food products, which that makes it different than other types of aggregators, primarily from local and regional producers to strengthen their ability to satisfy wholesale and institutional demand. Um, my journey into food system work was starting about the same time. We were trying to find markets for farmers in Northeast Iowa, other than the traditional commodity markets. What are ways that they could diversify their family farms? And food production was one of those options. As we investigated those markets, it quickly became clear to us that there was this missing level or missing tier in the food system. So this graphic from Wisconsin has been one of my longtime favorites because I think it really shows what our current food system looks like. When we talk about local foods, immediately people tend to think of the farmers markets or those farm stands, exactly the type of thing that Kim was just talking about with her farm. So that's what we call tier one, that direct producer to consumer market. There's also a tier zero, which is anything you produce on your own or anything you harvest on your own. So if you're raising livestock for your own use, you have a big garden or you go hunting or fishing, that's tier zero. Tier one is when you buy directly from your neighbors. Tier two is that strategic partnership level. That's the place where food hubs fit into our food system. And my argument for a long time has been that tier two is what disappeared in our state, or it's really been lacking for those food farmers to scale up to bigger production. At the other end of the food system is the big red circle, which is what we call the global or anonymous food system. That tends to be what most of Iowa agriculture pours into. So all the corn, beans, eggs, pork, dairy that is produced in our state tends to go into those processing and distribution channels where we no longer know the farm that it comes from. There's bigger aggregators, they're pulling supply from many states. Um, that tends to be the most common way that Iowa producers plug into the food system. What we're trying to build with the local food system is not only strengthen those bottom tiers, but add that tier two, that strategic partnership. So the other thing I want to make sure I point out with this slide is that this is not an either or argument. In order for us to feed all the people in our state as well as our country, we need all of the tiers. So, but what we also need to focus on is making sure that all the tiers are being supported in a way that they can all be healthy, sustainable, and profitable. So a food hub, what does a food hub look like? I often joke with people that I'm like, well, it's usually a couple people, trucks in a warehouse, right? So they have cold storage, they have a truck where they're delivering product, and then there's a person with a computer and a phone that is able to connect with the farmers and the customers. So this data comes from the National Food Hub Survey. Obviously, it's more like a biannual survey now of all the food hubs in the country. And you can see most of the food hubs in the country look the same. There's a space for the hub, there's trucks in a warehouse, and some of them will have online ordering systems. The pandemic really helped with the online ordering piece. Some of them will do processing. Some of them may have a retail space for people to come and shop. But the infrastructure that a food hub needs is pretty common across the country. What do food hubs sell? Obviously, it'll vary depending on where you live and what state you're in. But we tend to see a lot of produce, food hubs that are doing produce, meat, poultry, eggs, milk, grains. It's a similar here in Iowa, the same product mix. The hubs that are doing the best have the most different types of products that they're offering because now they're able to offer a consistent catalog of items to their customers all year round. Obviously, there's seasonality that comes into play with the food hubs, but being able to offer both produce, proteins, as well as other types of value-added products really helps with their availability. So this slide is a picture of the current members or some of the current members of the Food Hub Managers Working Group. So that's a group here in the state that started meeting back in 2012, 13. After the term Food Hub came out, there were folks that were saying, hey, we're food hubs. They were all new businesses at the time. They were all struggling with the same sorts of challenges. So they started meeting on a regular basis. What's really neat about this group is that they still continue to meet. And for the most part right now, they're still meeting every week on various dimensions of the aggregation and distribution piece. The map that you see on the screen shows some of the service areas of the different hubs. And then in the table, the colors correlate with those hubs. In Iowa, we have a mixture of business structures. So there are several hubs that are nonprofits, as well as some that are LLCs or in a cooperative. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is what type of hub are they? Now, the National Food Hub Survey likes to put the hubs into different groups. What is your primary market channel? Are you a direct-to-consumer type hub, or are you a wholesale hub? What we see here in Iowa is that we have hybrid hubs. All the hubs are doing a little bit of both. The X's mark their strength. So the hubs that are doing primarily wholesale will have the 2X's. The ones that are doing primarily direct-to-consumer will have the 2X's. So that gives you a feel for the scale and the geography that they're operating in. You can see the color shading on the map, but the circles are representing where weekly service is tending to occur. So if you're a customer within that circle area, you can usually get a weekly delivery from a food hub. Um, with the recent expansion in the last few years of the LFS and LFPA grants, the shading on the map has really expanded. Um, and the food hubs are reaching almost all the counties in the state. It's just not necessarily on a weekly schedule. So at the bottom, you can see the general characteristics. There's a saying out there when you've been to one farm, you've been to one farm. Well, same thing with the food hubs. Every food hub operates just a little bit differently, but here are some characteristics that they have in common. The direct-to-consumer hubs will tend to have online order cycles, either a weekly, every other week, or a monthly cycle. And a lot of times they'll have storefronts or pickup locations for those products. The wholesale hubs tend to be the larger hubs. They'll have bigger cold storage, larger delivery trucks, and weekly delivery routes. There is a link to the food hub directory on the screen, and I'll get that posted into the chat later. There are other aggregators in the state, and this is where it gets really confusing on how people are using the term food hub. There are some folks that are doing aggregation and are marketing off of a specialty store or a farm stand or farmer's market. And, they are definitely doing that aggregation and marketing piece for those local products. There's other groups that are doing multi-farm food box programs, and yes, those are all types of hub related activity. They tend to have limited delivery and distribution, which is where in the food hub managers working group, we tend to draw the line on how we define food hubs and how's that different than just another type of store. So this slide shows how in the last few years, food hubs, even though on that previous map, there were it looked like underserved areas of the state, when in reality, because there's trucks, they're serving almost all the corners of the state. So the food hubs are moving food all the way across the state. This data comes from the 2023 Food Hub Impact Report. And that year, food hubs sold food to over $2.5 million worth of local products to grocery stores, restaurants, school districts, all sorts of customers across the state. I'm right in the middle of doing the 2024 impact report, and that number is up over 4.3 million. So we're talking a lot of food is moving through those food hubs to make sure that customers are getting access to those products. How many farms are the food hubs working with? Well, in 2023, they reported working with over 350 different farms and food producers. And you can see where the scattering of the map, where those farms are located in Iowa and the neighboring states. The majority of those farms are going to be those small and medium-sized farms. Every food item that goes through a food hub is traced back to the farm it came from, or at least traced back to the group of farmers that are working together to produce that product. The other thing that we're seeing in the state that has been under progress for the last 3 years is what we call the Iowa Hub to Hub Network. And that was a project to figure out how do we connect the hubs in the state. In Iowa, we don't have a supply problem, although we could definitely be producing more. I think if we made the ask, we could have farmers growing a lot more product for us. What we have right now is a customer problem. We need more people buying the food so that we can ask farmers to start growing more and marketing more through the state. So as we were building this infrastructure at each of the different hubs, we started to see differences in, there are some parts of the state where things grow better than others, or where we have more farmers at a scaled up level than others. So this hub-to-hub network was created to help the hubs start selling to each other so that we could actually expand the the number of farms that those hubs are working with and fill in any gaps, especially during the winter months when some parts of the state may not have any more apples in storage or other types of crops. So the Hub to Hub network we just completed the third year of that network. In 2023, there was over $355,000 worth of products sold through the network to each other to help expand those market areas for farmers. So the last few slides that I want to share with you are directed towards those farmers and food producers that have been thinking about working with the Food Hub. And it's a collection of questions on the type of FAQs that we get. Well, how do I decide what do I want to do? Is a Food Hub a fit for me? So the first question is, how do you choose a Food Hub? Like we just reviewed, there's, each hub offers a different sales channel to farmers. So it's up to them to decide which way they want to go. For those direct to consumer hubs, they tend to have order cycles. So there may be a weekly option to participate, seasonal option, bi-weekly option. So you'll have to get to know their order cycle. And then those hubs usually require the farmer to bring the product in on the day specified, right? So if the cycle window is open from Monday through Wednesday, then they require the product to be delivered to the hub by Friday so it can be packed and picked up. Every hub operates a little bit different, but you understand the cycle part of it. The direct-to-consumer hubs tend to be a better fit for those beginning farmers or those very small farmers that may not have a lot of quantity to offer. Keep in mind, for both of these marketing channels, cottage foods are not allowed. So any food that requires a license needs to have that license. Obviously, fresh fruits and vegetables do not require a license, but other products like dairy, syrups, value-added products, anything that's cut, mashed, or dried will all need to be licensed. Hubs cannot accept anything produced under the cottage food law. On the wholesale side, typically the way it works is that once the farms are onboarded, they will send an availability list to the hub every week of what they have available to them. The hubs will offer the products to the customers. So this is where a food hub differs a little bit than the bigger distributors in that most of them are still operating on a just-in-time ordering cycle. So they are only going to bring in product that they have already sold. So it's really dependent on what the customers want will then reflect back to what the farmers bring into the hub. They're not a grocery store model where they're working off of inventory and trying to sell off of inventory. They're still very much in that just-in-time cycle. Wholesale hubs will usually move more volume for folks. Just as an example, Iowa Food Hub is a hybrid hub. Only 10% of their sales goes through their online marketplace and 90% is through their wholesale side. So while farmers can plug into both sides, there's definitely more volume moving on the wholesale side. Depending for those hubs that have trucks, there may be on-farm pickup options available for folks. So it becomes a little more convenient for farms that are further away. It could be an option. And then the wholesale side is better for those farms that are interested in scaling up or they're currently at scale. They're accessing wholesale markets already. So how do hubs onboard new farms? Everybody, again, is a little bit different, but for the most part, there's a vendor agreement that each hub will have the farm sign. They'll require a W-9, which just documents that it's a legitimate business in the country. They'll ask for copies of different licenses or permits that you may have. Most of them require liability insurance on behalf of the farm. And then if there are any food safety certifications or trainings, they also like to have that information on hand. In addition, if you're going to market on the direct-to-consumer side, there's usually some sort of process for you to provide information about your farm. Hi, this is Wiemerslage Farms. This is what we raise. These are the types of products that we have. They will also provide a way for you to upload or send in product information and photos to their online catalog. And then some systems may require the farmers to update their own inventory. It's not a deal breaker, but it definitely streamlines pieces if farmers can manage that piece for the online market every week. On the wholesale side, it's a little bit looser. The farms still need to provide regularly a list of products, what is the pack size and the prices, as well as what's going to be available each week that the hub can offer to their customers. How do hubs set their pricing? On the direct-to-consumer side, the farmers generally set their own pricing, and it's usually what I would call farmers market pricing. If you were to go to a farmers market, this is what you can expect. The hubs may charge a fee or take a commission from those sales in order to cover their costs to operate the online site or pay for any labor for packing or distribution. On the wholesale side, the prices are largely driven by what the customer is willing to pay. And it ends up being more of a negotiation or more of a discussion on what is fair market pricing at that scale. Hubs will keep in mind that the hubs will also add a markup to whatever the farmer offers them in order to cover their shipping and overhead costs. And that markup tends to vary. Right now it's around 20 to 25% is what we're seeing across the state. But keep in mind that the hubs are doing the legwork for your marketing, for your delivery. They're actually taking over some of those pieces so that the farmer doesn't have to do that, which then ends up being, again, that discussion or that negotiation of how farmers and the hub can partner together. They're truly partners in the work. How does payment work with the food hubs? On the direct-to-consumer side, the customers are paying for that product up front. So usually the farmers are paid pretty quickly after the market closes. So after that order cycle is done, there's either a check or an ACH that is made. On the wholesale side, those customers are usually paying on 14 to 30-day terms. There's some that'll pay on day of delivery, but most of them, especially the hubs that are working with a lot of schools, they're getting a check once a month. So they don't have that income to pay folks until they get paid. So hub payments will cycle and they'll vary from 14 days to 30-day terms. In some cases, there may be longer terms if it's related to a grant project. How do farms get their product to the hubs? It's a mixture and everybody's going to have a different situation. And you may have one answer for one hub and a different answer for another hub. Obviously, direct delivery is the one that works out better for the hubs. There may be options for on-farm pickup if you're on a food hub delivery route. The food hubs are also working really closely together to identify cross-docking locations. So what would it look like if there were several farmers that could drop off at a location in the Waterloo area, and then that product gets on the food hub truck for further distribution? So those cross-docks or those nodes are becoming a more frequent discussion topic with the food hub managers. How can we plug in more farmers? That brings up the hub to hub network. So as you can see, there's a truck that goes north and south every week and a truck that goes east and west every week. So in theory, you could get a product from Northeast Iowa in the Decorah area over to the Omaha area within a matter of 5 days. So there are options for folks to have an affordable way to move product across the state without necessarily having to take that distribution responsibility themselves. Some hubs will also hold some small inventory, but remember, a lot of these hubs don't have a lot of cash flow to be having it tied up in product that's not selling. So, the amount that they're holding in inventory is usually going to be pretty small, or at least pre-committed for a pretty quick turnover. How do hubs do, or do hubs do production planning with farmers? If I wanted to start working with a food hub, is there any sense of what I could sell in a year? On the direct to consumer side, it's really heavily dependent on customer interests. It's more operates more like a store. So until there's a better purchase history or identification of what those customers are looking for, it's a little bit harder to do production planning in that direct to consumer model. It's on the wholesale side, it really depends on customer standing orders. The hubs are working harder and harder all the time to get their consistent anchor buyers to identify what they want to purchase in the next year. Just today, um, a school copied me on an order that they had put together for all of their local purchases for next school year. That's the type of thing that allows us to do production planning with those farmers. So the more we can get customers committing to regular orders, the more we can do production planning for certain farms. That being said, there are definitely preferences within each hub of a primary distributor for, or a primary producer for carrots and a secondary producer for carrots, so that there's always backup supply for when orders come in. We rely on projections from the previous year to help us pull those plans together. And it's definitely easier when you have programs like LFPA or food boxes, because you can actually then schedule out what um, a, a monthly purchase order would look like for a distribution program like that. That's what I have for information about food hubs.
You so much, Teresa. You did such a great job at explaining a very variable and complicated topic. I personally learned so much about food hubs. We probably have a couple minutes to answer one quick question, and I know one that we got in the surveys before the webinar started was, are there ever mentorship opportunities through food hubs or opportunities for farmers to connect with each other? So I thought that's something you could maybe speak to.
That's one where I would answer the question with the question to dig in a little bit more as to what they mean. Um, Mentorship opportunities, the first organization that comes to mind is PFI, right? So there's that organization thrives on connecting and having farmers talk about their experiences with each other. So whether it's a formal mentorship program where you're connected with Labor for Learning or some of those other projects, or if it's just attending a field day to learn about how other farms are accessing these markets, that's a great way to do it. On the food hub side, there's probably some informal mentoring that's going on. I know the hub managers do a lot of education, especially for beginning farmers, on how does product need to get packed, what does quality control look like, providing feedback to folks. But that gets a little bit limited because those food hub managers are very busy people focusing on sales of product. So they tend to rely on the nonprofit organizations like the PFI folks, the extension folks, the SILT folks to help them with some of those pieces.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you so much. And I know we had an additional question too, if you all want to drop your emails in the chat. And also, this webinar will be recorded, so everyone is going to have an opportunity to go back and view it if there's any slides that they would like to see again. But thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to our panelists for all this information. And thank you to our SILT team for organizing this webinar. And again, at the very end of this, make sure you don't exit out of your Zoom browser so that you can still fill out that survey and enter the raffle for the chance to win a bottle of wine or the Silk merch basket. So thank you again, everyone, so much for being here. I hope you have an incredible rest of your Wednesday. And there are the emails. I'll give everyone a moment in case you want to copy them down. Otherwise, thank you so much. Bye, everyone.